Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Transit Report starting on Monday, July 29th. We are in the final week of this lunar cycle. And because of that, I want to go backwards a little bit and take a brief look at this new moon in Cancer we had back on July 5th. And we'll go through each quarter moon chart just to ground us and what the thematic was this month. And we still have this whole week ahead of us here to contemplate that, to integrate that. The last week of the lunar cycle is always a wonderful time to pause, take some deep breaths, find that appreciation and gratitude for all that we've been through this month. And so let's take a look at where we started. I'm going to go back to here's the Cancer new moon that took place on July 5th. And if we look at the sign of Cancer, we can see that Venus was conjunct the new moon. And the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So in that sense, it's always one of the most potent, emotionally powerful lunar cycles of each year when we have the new moon in her home sign. So right away, we're thinking of Cancerian themes, our home, family, our inner world, right? The moon reflects the light of the sun. And in the same sense, the moon is part of our personal inner world and that reactive emotional drive that pushes us out into life. So very connected to our internal emotional world and how we feel secure or insecure in that. But a very sensitive new moon, to say the least. And what was adding to that sensitivity was that Venus was not only conjunct the new moon, so she was bringing her love, beauty, and harmony. And of course, she's wanting inner harmony as well. So really adding the flavor of that deep sensitivity. But Venus was also square to Chiron, the wounded healer. And so this Venus square Chiron was indicating at the new moon that dealing with wounds from the past and our emotional relationship to those events may have been brought to the surface. So with all the sensitivity of the new moon, little pokes from other people or anywhere out there in the world, because we're speaking about the transit field, we may have been feeling that extra degree of sensitivity where someone said something that may in and of itself been rather benign, but it may have really stimulated us in a deep way. But certainly that Venus square Chiron, really important, and particularly as I move through the quarter moons this cycle to watch the development of that aspect. And we also had another strong aspect where Mars, which was in gate 23 at the time of the new moon, was sextile to Saturn in gate 22. Now, Saturn is retrograde in gate 22. And whenever a planet is in retrograde, it is doing a re-examination. It's going back over terrain it's covered to, in a sense, collect more details that may have been left behind. It's a period of reanalysis. Saturn is the planet of structure and discipline, and most importantly, maturity. So doing a Saturn retrograde in gate 22, we can think about how we're all having this opportunity to analyze how our solar plexus, and specifically gate 22, the energy to express ourselves in interaction, has been under review and development. How are we learning from our past experiences, healing from them, integrating the maturity, and sharing it as we move out into the world? So very important activity Saturn is up to in gate 22. And the other thing I want to highlight about this new moon chart is that if you look at the root center, because the new moon was in gate 39, line 6, lined up with the sun in gate 39, line 6, the gate of provocation, which puts the Earth in its polarity in gate 38, and we also had Pluto in gate 60, we had all three of the individual root gates of pressure activated. So a lot of deep root pressure stimulating everything that has to do with our individual circuitry, our truth, our purpose, our higher knowing, finding our emotional spirit. This was all part of the play this week or this month as we started with this new moon. And lastly, we had the channel of the wavelength. This logical channel, it was activated by the South Node in gate 48. And we had at the time Jupiter in gate 16, but this channel of the wavelength is part of our logical process to refine, to improve, to smooth out the pattern to a mirror finish gloss of refinement. So when we take these layers of emotional sensitivity, working with our past experiences and wounds from the past, there was this calling or invitation from the wavelength channel to say, how do we move through that? How do we integrate, process, and refine our Saturnian and gate 22 emotional interaction with others? From there, we moved into the first quarter moon, very stimulating first quarter moon. This is always when the moon is making her first square to the sun. The moon is half illuminated in the sky. And we can see that the moon was forming a T-square with the sun and Chiron. The moon was opposite Chiron. So again, here again, on the very first quarter moon, we're getting this Chiron really brought into the priority here. I didn't mention, but Chiron has been in gate 42, line 3 right now. This is the gate of growth and evolution. It's in the channel of maturation, a design based on balanced development. So we're really, again, feeling this sensitivity to our past and how we can refine and mature and grow, gate 42, through the process of healing, integrating, forgiving all of these experiences and moving into the future. Very stimulating first quarter moon. We also had the channel of the alpha, this logical channel of leadership into the future. So I really have felt like, and there'll be some more points to add to this, but this lunar cycle was a important transition. So much happening in our inner world, but the transition as we move into the Leo season, which is fixed fire, it's the sign of the sun, how we are shining out into the world and expressing our own personal creativity, which is a very individual circuit group important keynote, particularly with those 3 individual root pressure gates that happened at the new moon. Here we had the dynamic growth and development possible at the first quarter moon stage to, again, dig down deep into this emotional world. Then we moved into a very potent, powerful full moon. The sun was at the last degree of Cancer, putting the full moon opposite in the final degree of Capricorn. And again, this speaks to this transition from our Cancerian inner emotional world and the healing and development process we may be going through and how we can shine that out in a Capricornian way. This is a sign associated with the 10th house about our public appearance, our vocation, how we offer our services to the world. And that full moon was very tightly conjunct to the moon. I'm sorry, to Pluto. So we had a moon-Pluto conjunction at the full moon in gate 60. The gate of limitations, also called the gate of acceptance, part of this individual mutative process of accepting whatever limitations we have in our life, wherever we've come from. It is what it is, but how do we alchemize that? How do we find the gifts built into our life experiences to accept those limitations and transcend as a result of that? That very powerful Plutonic full moon was in an exact trine to Mars, who had just entered Gemini in gate 20. So now we have this really strong, supportive, free-flowing aspect of a trine between Mars in gate 20, Pluto and the moon in gate 60. Again, we're getting a sense of how deeply individual this Cancerian lunar cycle has been. And that trine between Mars, Moon, Pluto, all of those were sextile to Neptune. If you look at that blue triangle, it's kind of like a mini grand trine. It's a trine, but it's got 2 sextiles. And the apex of that blue triangle is Neptune, also at 29 degrees of Pisces, which was in gate 25. So Neptune being the pinnacle of that triangle really draws the attention and the focus to where Neptune is. Well, number one, Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. Neptune is the planet of limitlessness. Neptune is beyond the boundary of Saturn, right? So it speaks to the limitless possibilities. That's why it's associated with our spirituality, our creativity, our imagination, sometimes delusion, but it really speaks to this ever omnipotent limitlessness that exists there. And Neptune's in gate 25 in the channel of initiation. Gate 25 is part of our G center, higher self center. It is the spirit of the higher self. And so, just from the keynoting here, we're getting a sense of how this plutonic transformation, involution, evolution, empowering mutation that's taking place deep within our emotional world is being supported by this evolution of our gate 25, moving into our higher self, letting go of things that are no longer serving us. That's a very plutonic aspect. Even though our mental connection to things can be strong based on projected judgments that aren't always helpful, Pluto is there to strip away that facade, to strip away lower ego motives into the higher self. Pluto helps us uncover hidden truths about ourselves that we may not have been aware of. And all of this was in supportive trine sextile frequency, all tied to the spirit and growth and evolution of our higher self. And yeah, just an incredibly potent full moon. We also, just prior to this full moon, we had the Mars-Uranus conjunction, which took place in gate 8, line 2. That took place on July 15th, the week prior to this chart that we're looking at, which was also bringing this incredibly stimulating, Uranian, electrifying, lightning-like quality lining up with the planet Mars, the god of war, and that physical energy, a very eccentric and powerful conjunction in gate 8, the gate of individual contribution to group goals. In line 2, the line of higher selfless service. So again, potent supportive time for inner evolution and how that transforms and mutates into outer expression. As we move to the third quarter moon, which I'm recording this on Monday, July 29th, but we had the third quarter moon Saturday evening. So just a day before yesterday in the evening. Not a lot of aspects in the astrological wheel, except for the moon squaring the sun, which is always when the third quarter moon takes place. We are in the waning phase. She is decreasing in illumination on her way back home to another meetup with the sun at the time of the new moon. Third quarter moons are very supportive. They have dynamic energy because it is the moon in a square to the sun. So the two luminaries are lining up in a very dynamic quality focused on growth and development. But because the moon is in her waning phase, there's this sense of coming home, to stopping and really taking stock. To appreciate all that we've been through, to take agency, to evaluate our boundaries, particularly our emotional boundaries with others. What we may have learned through the lunar cycle and that potent plutonic full moon, where do we need to let things go? Where do we need to add more effort? But it's all about really tending the garden of our soul during this waning phase, and definitely incorporating some self-nourishment. In fact, the moon herself was in gate 27, which is the gate of caring. That gate speaks very much to starting with self-nourishing first. We can't help others if we're not taking care of ourselves. So this idea of self-nourishing, and she was in line 4, which is the bottom line of the upper trigram and transpersonal, how we can externalize that care. And it's the line of generosity. So really beautiful location for her during this incredible emotional cycle we've been in. But here she's taking that power and agency to nourish ourselves, reestablish important emotional boundaries, and move from this inner development into an outer transition and sharing with others. So all of that being said, that brings us to today. And again, we're in the final week of this lunar cycle. I will close this report with a quick look at the new moon in Leo, which is taking place on Sunday coming up. But as we start out the week today, a couple things I want to point out for the frequency of this week, in addition to it being the final week and hopefully stopping for a moment, take some time for yourselves. Um, Really stopping to smell the roses, I think, would be my title for the week, how important that can be after this emotional ride we've been on. But I want you to look at the astrological wheel and see that we have Venus at 22 degrees Leo. She is in gate 4 currently, and Venus is now forming a trine to Chiron in Aries in gate 42. So we started the new moon with Venus squaring Chiron, and we're going to close out this week. And this aspect will be part of the main frequency all through this week. It'll be exact as I go through. You'll see tomorrow on Tuesday. It'll be exact, but it's definitely part of the frequency of this entire week. Venus, again, the planet of love, harmony, beauty, what we want out of this life, that Venusian passion of love and balance, is now trining that Chiron, the wounded healer, how we may have worked through overcoming these limitations, working with that very powerful full moon that may have illuminated things we hadn't seen before, and how we can incorporate this through this Venus Chiron trine to support our healing process. We're still dealing with very personal, deep inner core issues. I want to point your attention, if you look at the body graph and the personality activations of the transit field, if you go down to the planet Saturn in gate 22, as I've already mentioned, Uranus is still in that gate 8. We brought up Uranus briefly, and Neptune in the 25 and Pluto in 60. All of the planets from Saturn outward are all still in individual gates. And so that's why we're having this deeply stimulating period of asking questions like, who am I? What is my truth? How do I fit into the current landscape of this rather chaotic world? But how do I find my truth? And so whenever I'm saying these words, I'm also thinking about our personal authority in human design. Nothing is more important than continuing this relationship with what is my authority. If it's an inner authority, we have a center that we can build a felt sense and relationship with that is our voice of truth, that can guide us through all of these planetary invitations we're getting in all these aspects. Or if you're a mental projector and have a process-oriented echolocation, recognition, and appreciation authority through your process of following recognition, or a reflector, which has a lunar authority, this association with watching their pattern of impulses through the lunar transits in their chart, whatever any personal authority is, these transits are invitations to connect with that voice of truth as we navigate these opportunities. But I did want to mention that all along in the background, all of the outer planets, and they are very slow moving, all 4 of those from Saturn outward. When I think about Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the wheel, I'm thinking about the scaffolding. They move so slowly. They really hold the overall framework. And then the faster moving planets, as they zip around the wheel, they're forming temporary aspects. So they're like pinging the outer scaffolding. And it's this dynamic interplay between the outer planet scaffolding and the inner planet frequencies as they have all these different conversations. But we're still getting very much a collective invitation to go inward to our voice of truth, our sense of purpose, and our personal inspiration that will bring a fulfilling feeling for this incarnation path. So that Venus trine Chiron, very important aspect this month or this week. Additionally, and just to mention that these charts you're looking at are all run for 12 noon Mountain Time. Earlier this morning, the moon would have been conjunct Uranus. So we're bringing this emotional quality into this electrifying energy of Uranus. Here, right at the noontime chart we're looking at, the moon is just now forming a trine to that Pluto. Now, the way I look at this is We had the Mars-Uranus conjunction on July 15th. They're separating now. Mars is all the way to 6 degrees Gemini. But remember that the moon, as she goes through the conjunction to Uranus today and Mars tomorrow, this is the first time the moon has been conjunct these two planets since they were conjunct each other. So what we're getting here is this lunar association communication with what did that Mars-Uranus conjunction on July 15th in gate 8, line 2, what are we learning about that now? That was a very strong frequency. And as the moon passes through here, there may be things that come to light. So I think that's an important part of today. And again, in the afternoon today, she'll make the exact trine to Pluto, where she was conjunct at the full moon. We're now in a trine, and that's forming that same triangle with Neptune, because the moon at the same time will be forming a sextile to Neptune, bringing this emotional connection to gate 25, spirit of our higher self. And so that's why I think this is such a really beautiful week for this sense of reflection. And I'll add another layer to that when I get to tomorrow's chart. But really, again, taking time this week to breathe, appreciate, give ourselves some hugs, love those the people we care about, to offer appreciation then to them. There's a heightened sense of acceptance and awareness in the offering this week to really take stock of where we've been. We are moving to a different frequency as we move into the Leo season that we're in, and how we're shining out in that Leo way, what's possible through the inner work and development, and how we share that out into the world. So yeah, the moon very active today with those conjunctions, trine to Pluto, sextile to Neptune, as the moon is in the Gemini, very active emotional day, I would say. As we go into Tuesday, you can see the moon has now well into Gemini, having already formed that conjunction with Mars that I mentioned. And then in the afternoon on Tuesday, we'll be forming a conjunction with Jupiter. Something's going on here because Mars is closing its conjunction with Jupiter. That's going to happen in another week or so. And so again, I feel like there's very important interactions the moon is having right now as she closes out the week. And so I think, again, just taking the time to have some contemplation, really regulate our body, connect with our body. You know, that third quarter moon, I didn't highlight this point, but it was in Taurus, which is about the earth, really planting our feet in the grass and the water and the sand and the dirt. Connecting with Mother Gaia right now can offer illuminating support in terms of that self-nourishing and awareness that's possible this week. But yeah, moon, and as you look at that moon in Gemini, look at all that energy. We have the moon herself, we've got Mars on one side, all the physical energy that comes from that, and Jupiter is the planet of expansion. Anything Jupiter touches expands, and currently Jupiter is in gate 35. And I want to, just for a little where we're going, that Mars-Jupiter conjunction coming up is going to happen in gate 35 in line 6. So that's going to come back into my conversation as we go forward, to recognize that there's a lot happening with Jupiter currently in gate 16, the gate of skills, logical expression, and then Jupiter moves into gate 35, where he is now. This is all part of this Gemini throat expression area of the wheel, but there's a real progress in the offering here. How are we moving along in this development? And it's so closely connected to Chiron, because every quarter moon we looked at, we saw Chiron being brought to the priority as well. So a lot of development, a very developmental story that I feel like we're in here right now. And yeah, so we can still see that I mentioned the Venus trine Chiron. They're both at 23 degrees. So that aspect will reach its zenith of its frequency on Tuesday, but will certainly be with us for the rest of the week as we move towards the next new moon. Also, there's another interesting thing happen that's going to take place this midweek from Tuesday through Friday, which is if you look at the sun, which is has moved. I didn't mention that yet. The sun has moved into gate 33. So when I looked at this, I was really feeling like what a beautiful placement for the sun, lining up with the final week of the lunar cycle, as again, the final week of this emotional cycle to reflect and review and prepare for the next cycle, to really take our time to smell the roses. And now we have the sun moving into gate 33, called the gate of retreat, right? This is in the channel of the prodigal, the design of the witness, and gate 33 is a stop codon. This is the end of the cycle of experience in that sense, archetypally. So with the sun in 33, again, really emphasizing this, take a break here. Take some time to look back. This sensing circuitry associated with the cycle of development in the solar plexus is so related to looking back at past experiences. So we have not only the final week of the lunar cycle, but we have the sun in gate 33. That's why I'm nicknaming this the week of stop and smell the roses in your garden, to find the appreciation everywhere, to see what love sees, no matter how difficult in life, all these experiences from our past, to find the appreciation in it. Everything has been happening to serve us individually. It's how we view it. It's our perspective. It's our understanding that accepting life as it's been provides the mutation to transcend where it's going and the gifts that may flower from that. So very important with gate 33, sun there. That puts the earth in gate 19 in the root center. This is the pressure to be sensitive to the needs of others. And so when I'm thinking about all those past experiences, I'm thinking about how challenging those sensitive periods were. How do we show up for other people? How did they show up from us? Where did it work out? Where did it not work out? How have we grown and matured as a result of observing through this new lens that we're at? We're in the present time now, looking at the past. What have we learned? How can we grow? How can we find the empowerment through appreciation and acceptance to move into our next phase? So that's sun in gate 33. I also want to note this interesting configuration we're going to see here. The sun is at 8 degrees Leo, forming an exact sextile to the south node and a trine to the north node. Additionally, if you look at Mars at 6 degrees Gemini, Mars is moving into a sextile to the north node and a trine with the south node. Now, that's going to take a couple days to be exact, but I want to mention this on Tuesday and kind of track us through the week here. We have the sun life force energy, the powerful physical energy of Mars, lining up in very supportive aspects to the nodal axis. Well, the south node is in gate 18, the gate of correction in logical circuitry in Libra. So what have we learned through these Libran relationships with other people from our past in our emotional connections with them? And how are we moving towards Aries, the north node, where we're heading to, in an Aries frequency, which is about individual self-expression, how we move our boundaries out into the world in gate 17 specifically, another logical gate called the gate of opinions. It's in the channel of acceptance. So we're getting this sense of this frequency from the fueling of the sun and earth connecting with our nodal path right now. So this is why I'm calling this a period of transition from our inner world of development and pain and past wounds, triggering experiences, and using those sensitivities right now, gate 19, to reflect gate 33 on what this all means for us. Really supportive this week, yet again, as I say, to take some time, do some journaling, do some really deep contemplation, take stock of life, where it is right now, and where we'd like to see it grow through following our own authority and voice of truth. But a very interesting configuration, watching the Mars and Sun interacting with the nodes this week. You'll see it very strong in these aspects here. And okay, so let's go ahead and go into Wednesday. And the moon herself, traveling through the end of Gemini, is going to pass through gate 12 on Wednesday and line up with Saturn in gate 22. And so for the better part of the day on Wednesday, we're going to get the channel of openness, the design of a social being or not. But the frequency here in this primary emotional manifesting channel is all about my empowered emotional energy to interact with others. And so that's why that Saturn in 22, this is a longer term process we're going through, but there's a deeply mutative, possibly empowering transformation happening within our emotional expression, how we've grown, learned, and matured through dealing with Chiron and gate 42, and how that energy is moving within us, and how we're sharing our new expressions, our new opportunities to relate with each other. So channel of openness on that day on Wednesday. And again, you can see that Mars now at 7 degrees, that trine and sextile to the nodes getting stronger. The sun at 9 degrees, just past the exact trine sextile. But wow, this is a really powerful sun to Mars energy, fueling our connection and understanding with where are we going from this Libran relationship energy into how have we learned and grown, and can we be more self-confident within our own integrity as we shine out into this North Node in Aries. Also, on Wednesday, not only is the moon in gate 12, but the moon is also forming a sextile with Venus on Wednesday, even deepening that emotional relationship between the Venus trine Chiron. It just feels really open, this energy. I mean, it's very lunar connected, it's nodal axis connected. I mean, there's something to really tune into, and I think following that natural rhythm of the lunar cycle is really going to open the door for any self-exploration that you're looking for right now. Very deep emotional insights could be coming to the surface during this week. Okay, let's move into Thursday. Now, the moon also jumps into this nodal axis on Thursday. The moon is traveling through Cancer. Now, this is a really important period because the moon is now back into Cancer where this new moon started. So she's traveling this portion of the wheel and the sky where all of these layers of this cycle of development started, and she's going to be forming a T-square with that nodal axis, and she is in gate 52 in the root center when this T-square is formed. So we have the energy of Mars connecting with the nodal axis, we have the energy of the sun connecting, and now we have the moon connecting with this nodal axis. So again, something deeply powerful in the offering through the planetary frequencies this week to align with this authentic direction of inner emotional development and how we're sharing that out into the world from an empowered stance, how we're listening to our stories evolve. Now, I don't think I mentioned it or reviewed it on that full moon chart, but at the full moon, the sun was in gate 56. So in my full moon report, Brandy and I were talking about how this storytelling, how we're hearing our stories. Hopefully what we're going to be hearing by the end of this lunar cycle is a new story, an empowered story that has grown and matured as a result of the peaks and valleys of these emotional experiences. This is the time. And so I think all of these sun, moon, Mars aligning in these dynamic aspects to the lunar nodes right now is pointing to this transition, this sort of a crossroads of how that's going to affect us as we move through the rest of this year, and as we move into the new moon in Leo coming up in just a few days from Thursday. So as we go into Friday and we keep an eye on the moon there, traveling through Cancer, she would have just traversed over the terrain she covered at the new moon, and she moves into gate 62. And with the North Node in gate 17 for the day, the better part of the day, on Friday, we're getting the channel of acceptance. Now, this channel, it's called a design of the organizational being, kind of a mundane description of the power of this channel, because remember, we're talking about logical, it's patterns, it's associated with the spleen and health and survival and sustainability, but it's got this lunar quality. She's wrapping up this incredible lunar cycle here, and the message on this particular day is to accept through the refinement, through the growth of Chiron in 42, through the evolution and maturity of Saturn in gate 22. The idea is that now there is a acceptance on what has been, but with this channel, we're getting the improvement of how we can be more organized in our health and sustainability, particularly concerning our emotions, into this refinement and sharing it through the details of the moon in gate 62. So wrapping up an incredibly powerful cycle here. I want to jump to Saturday, because there's an aspect here. I don't tend to bring up septiles, the aspect called septiles, a whole lot. They're considered a minor aspect. I only look at them at particular times when, one, they have to be really strong, and two, they have to fit into the overall storyline that I'm seeing. But I want to mention it here on Saturday because we are at the final day of this lunar cycle. On Sunday, there'll be a new moon in Leo. You can see the moon has already entered Leo, but let me talk you through what happens here on Saturday, because this is very interesting. As early in the morning, the moon would have been finishing her movement through Cancer. And so once again, she's reaching the end of the zodiac sign in Cancer, which would put her opposite Pluto. Well, first, before opposition to Pluto, first she would form the trine to Neptune. Okay, trine back to that gate 25. Then the moon crosses into Leo and forms an opposition with Pluto. And then here on this chart you're looking at noontime on Saturday, the moon at 3 degrees Leo, she forms an exact quincunx to that Saturn in gate 22. And so this is, again, if you think about the last day of the cycle, this is wrapping it up. This is, what's possible at the end of this lunar cycle. And what we are seeing here is the moon and the sun in Leo shining out with our individual integrity and creativity in a fixed fire sign of creative self-expression. Quincunx that Saturn, which is a bit of a challenging aspect, but it's dynamic. Quincunx is like, we really have to work with it. It doesn't have that free-flowing support of trines and sextiles. It's an agitation, but it's an important agitation. Working with that Saturn in gate 22, restructuring frameworks of emotional interaction that we've had in the past, but are changing as we move into the future. So really dynamic last day here of the new moon. Other big aspects right here. Well, I'll show this actually when I show the new moon. But I want to mention these sextiles. That's where I was going. If you look at Jupiter at 14 degrees of Gemini in gate 35, line 4, Jupiter is forming a septile with Chiron. And there's another septile, which is Mercury in gate 59 over in Virgo, is forming a septile with Neptune. Now, this aspect that I mentioned that I don't talk about a lot, they're very interesting. The septile, the one-word keynote in astrology is mystical. It's a non-prime number, which means it's one of those number dot and then infinite decimals. But in modern astrology, the septile indicates there's something possible. We don't know what. We usually can't even know until after it's over and we look back and connect the dots. But it's almost like a portal when we have a septile like this. And so I'm thinking of Jupiter in gate 35, this planet of expansion, good fortune, and benevolence in the gate of progress, emotional solar plexus, manifesting experiences. Are we gaining traction and progress? And something's here, this Jupiter connection to that Chiron. There's something possible with this septile. I think if we've done all of this inner work throughout the month that I've been describing, and then that Mercury in gate 59. Now, gate 59 is the gate of dispersion. This is the sacral energy to break down barriers to achieve bonds. So it's connected to this idea of intimacy with others, which is certainly involving the solar plexus. So we have a mercurial energy here in this idea of breaking down bonds with our newfound emotional maturity that's been gleaned from this cycle. And that Chiron is in a septile to Neptune, this mystical aspect, this something could come through from the other side with gate 25. So incredible closeout to this lunar cycle. Again, I think we'll just have to live through it and look back. But what I definitely is encouraging in these final days of the lunar cycle is contemplation, reflection, self-nourishing, relaxing, connecting to the earth as we prepare for our next cycle. Oh, one last thing to mention. Well, actually, let me go ahead and go into the new moon. Brandy and I will be doing a full report on this chart itself, so I'm not going to go super deep into it. Almost more to give a preview of what's coming next week. We have the new moon in Leo. Again, I mentioned this incredible creative sign of integrity. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are at the zenith of that summer feeling. We're still having long, warm days. It just has that. We're fixed summer up here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so really appreciating the flowers, the insects, the birds, all of nature is just communicating and thriving. And so this new moon, it's got a different feeling than that deep inner world of Cancer, right? We were going through this idea of transition that I was speaking about. So that's part of this next cycle we'll be talking about, is this creative expression in the public world, how we're shining out with our Leo frequency of creativity. And that Mars Jupiter is closing in its conjunction. So that'll be part of the report next week. But wow, think about Mars and Jupiter lining up, man. That's some powerful, expansive energy that's taking place. And at the time of the new moon, that Jupiter is exactly a square and a half from Pluto in gate 60. So it's bringing this expansive frequency, fueling this transformation taking place in gate 60. So, we've still got that Neptune sextile Pluto working in the background. So there's just, as you can hear from the keynoting, having scanned through the month up to where we're going, this Neptune Pluto sextile in the background, it's gate 60 in a deep harmonic relationship with gate 25. So the work that we're doing archetypally, whether or not you have gate 60 in your chart, I'm talking, archetypally, we are working with individual limitations that could either lead to suffering, pain, and despair, or cathartic experiences of transformation and empowerment through the alchemy of Pluto in gate 60, is closely associated with this spirituality and creativity of Neptune in gate 25. So the backdrop of that frequency is really spanning all of this period of time, but incredible support for inner transformational work. And we'll make this transition into how we're shining that out into our communities and into our outer world. That new moon is taking place in gate 33, line 6, the line of truth and wisdom and transpersonal expression of integrity in gate 33, which is about what we've gleaned from our emotional maturity from the past. So super potent, dynamic time. And if I could end with anything, it would be take this week, hug a tree, hug yourself, take care of yourself, nourish as we prepare for another cycle of emotional experience.